It's no secret that we live in a time of heightened social tension. There are issues all around us that we are being inundated with through the media and through the news and through conversations around the dinner table with our family. At times, it can feel really overwhelming as to how we are supposed to tackle these massive issues like racism, recidivism rates, foster care reform, healthcare. The list goes on and on and on. But today's guest is tackling these issues with a different kind of ammunition: human-centered design. Welcome to Business with Purpose. I'm your host, Molly Stillman of stillbeingmolly.com, and this show is all about bringing you the stories behind the brands, companies, and small businesses that are changing the world. Each week, I interview a different entrepreneur, a CEO, a nonprofit director, or just an incredible person who's trying to make a positive impact, not only through their personal life, but with their career. My goal is to show you that no matter what you do for a living, you can make an impact right where you are. My guest this week is Durell Coleman, the founder of DC Design, a social impact design firm that uses human-centered design to fix some of the world's biggest problems. For Durell, his passion is all about injecting excitement and enthusiasm into industries working on the front lines of America's most pressing social challenges: the foster care system, prison reform, emergency rooms, and education. This conversation is rich and deep and thoughtful, and I hope it challenges some of the ways of thinking that you know maybe within your heart, and it encourages you to get involved in some of these issues. So without further ado, on to my conversation with Durell. Durell, I am so excited to be talking to you. You're all the way on the other side of the country. I'm in North Carolina. You're in California, right?
I'm actually in New Haven, Connecticut right now.
Oh, wait. Okay. So, but are you? Did I make that up in my head then that you're from California?
No. Well, so I split my time actually between California and the East Coast over here, between New Haven and New York.
Okay, so you're actually not that far from me then. But my aunt actually lives in Madison, so you're not too far from there.
Wonderful.
It's a pretty area of the country, but much colder than North Carolina.
A little bit cold right now, yeah.
Yeah. So I am just so excited to have you on the show today. When I learned about you and what you're doing with DC Design, and honestly, I will be like, this is just me being completely transparent. When I saw that it's a social impact design firm, I was like, I don't even know what that is, but this sounds awesome. And then the more I began to dig into learning about you, I was like, yes, I'm on board. So I am just really excited to share your story with the Business with Purpose podcast community today. So Durell, I'm going to have you do what all my guests do, and that's give us the Durell 101. So tell us who you are, what you do, and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. My name's Durell Coleman. I am the son of David and Annette Coleman. I'm really excited to be on your podcast here today as well. But yeah, I guess I could tell you a little bit about me going all the way back to my childhood. So raised by my two parents, fantastic and incredible individuals, along with an older brother and a younger sister. Was born in Nebraska, but grew up in Texas. And from a really young age, I think I've really been blessed to know what I wanted to do and what I wanted to be. It's really funny when I was a kid, I remember making things for my grandmother. And that sort of being a really big spark for me along the way, growing up with a family that really, if we were going to have anything, we were going to make them. So when I was 8 years old, my mom asked, "Hey, what do you want to be when you grow up?" I remember very clearly saying, "I'm going to be an inventor." And she looked at me and she said, "Well, how are you going to make money?" And I said, "I'm going to have my own company one day that makes things and sells them." And for me, at 8 years old, it was a really matter-of-fact sort of thing. But things changed quickly in my family. That next year, my brother was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer, and was really challenging for us, really challenging, you can imagine, for a 9-year-old, but also really challenging for him. He was 14 at the time. But that experience was incredibly transformative for me. I watched for the next 5 years as he grew older. He beat the odds over and over again. He went into remission. He came out of remission. He, came back and was on the varsity soccer team at the school. He graduated on time, standing ovation, et cetera. And he was my hero. But at the end of that 5 years, he lost his battle with cancer. And I was devastated. This is something that sort of defined, many parts of my childhood and my family's life. And so I was sort of looking for a path forward from that point. One thing that I started to think about was this sort of declaration that I'd made about being an inventor, about really wanting to create things. And when I was younger, it was, I want to make flying cars, and I want to be on Oprah, and I want to win awards, and I want to, do all those things. But after reflecting on his life, this notion that there are people who are really fighting. They're fighting for their lives. They're trying their best to be their best, but there are barriers in their way. I started to think about what I wanted to create and realized that for me to create things that didn't improve quality of life, that didn't give people that chance, felt meaningless. And so I set down this path of saying, well, I'm going to create things. I'm going to be an inventor, but I'm going to invent things that help other people. And that really has been the lightning rod through my life, for the next 15, 16 years here. I'm really blessed by my two parents that nurtured that notion, this idea that I could go on and invent the life that I wanted to live. But went off to Stanford, studied mechanical engineering, sustainable design for my master's there as well, and then started a company that was really looking at how do I begin to address these big problems in the world. We were designing wind turbines the first time out. That company failed. And then I started my second company, which is the current one that I run, called DC Design. And things have been going quite well since then. So I just feel really blessed to have the opportunity to do the sort of work that we do, but also to have lived the life that I've lived so far.
Man, just thank you so much for sharing your story, and especially sharing the story of your brother and the impact that had on you. So you were 14 at the time of his passing, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, my mom passed away when I was 17. And so I always say, because, you never compare grief, and you never, especially like when you lose a family member that's that close to you at such a young kind of, impressionable is not the right word, but you know what I'm saying? Like at just a young age, it really does transform your way of thinking, because you're suddenly thrust into this perspective on life that, oh crap, like life is short and like you have no idea how much time you have, and like life all of a sudden becomes really precious. And I've talked with so many other friends who have lost like parents at a young age or a sibling at a young age, and they all have this exact same perspective that's just kind of unique to people who have experienced that kind of loss. And so is that something that you've ever really like consciously thought about, that it's just like you feel almost this, and again, I don't even know if this is the word, but like this sense of pressure to really live your life as much as you can with the time that you've been given and make an impact on other people with that time? Does that make sense?
It does. It makes a ton of sense. I think the answer is absolutely. I think you framed it really well, and I'm sorry to hear about your mother as well. I think there's something about seeing someone that close to you pass away, especially at a young age. The common mantra, right? The notion is like, life is short, live it up.
Yeah.
And I came away from this saying, life is short, which means I only have so much time to get done the things that I was, put here to do.
Yeah.
And I've tried in every aspect of my life, really, from the way that I approach each new year. I name each of my years, and there's a theme to it.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
There we go.
Yes.
Wow.
Samesies.
We're identifying some things right now.
Samesies.
Yeah. So I approach it with this sort of theme-based notion, and in it, it's a chance for me to transform myself more and more into the person I want to become.
Yeah.
From the way that I, try to be close to my family, knowing that I won't have them forever, and just try to be balanced, really, that being present with thinking about the future and the future of the world that we live in, and that sort of balance that you have to strike.
Yeah. Now, I want to ask you about DC Design, but before I do that, you briefly mentioned, and it was a wind turbine company, like your first company failed. And so often we look at different types of successful entrepreneurs, and we brush over the failures. And I honestly don't even really like to use the word failure. Like we brush over the learning experiences because I know I've failed a lot in my life, but I look at those things as opportunities that pushed me to become better in whatever I'm doing. And in 99.99% of the cases where I look back on a quote unquote failure, I'm just like, man, I'm so grateful for that. Had I not had that failure, or had I not had that kind of season of suffering or whatever it was in both my business and in my personal life, I wouldn't be where I am. So what were the things that you learned from that first company that wasn't quote unquote successful that helped to really launch you into running something that is successful?
Yeah. I think what's really interesting about humans is the way that we are able to sense highs by sensing lows in some ways, right? And the way that we're able to learn from what we've been through because we start to figure out what that feels like. And so I learned so much from that first company. And it was really painful at the same time. It's like both can be true, you know? The first company, we were designing wind turbines for developing world power generation. Mm-hmm. So we were trying to, build renewable energy sources to deliver lighting to individuals in industrializing nations. And that was an aim that made a lot of sense. I had been to Nicaragua and done research on how access to electricity affects quality of life and, sort of set out to build a company around that. But I was young and graduating from college at the time, didn't have the funds to move to Latin America or another country in general, had some debt for my master's to pay off as well. And I compromised that vision. So I said, well, you know what? I'm going to build wind turbines, low-cost turbines for homeowners in America. Maybe some of them will be rural, so maybe some of them will be local. We had this sort of unique turbine design that looked different than other typical wind turbines, so it didn't just look like a big fan. And that's really where things met their end, right? There was no real need for that solution for homeowners here. And so I had poured like 4 years of my life into this. I'd spent a couple years of my undergrad at Stanford studying that, going to Nicaragua, doing my research on that, developing different designs. Again, I studied mechanical engineering, so I was constantly working on the fluid mechanics and the thermodynamics and more so the fluid mechanics of the design. And then at the end of that, for that to fail, I experienced this incredible soul-crushing defeat. My roommate and best man at my wedding, he said to me at the time, he said, I've never seen you so down as you were at that time. And that's how I felt. Yeah. So that sort of soul-crushing defeat was really hard to come up against. But I do think that there's this notion that runs through my mind a lot, kind of going back to that first story about my brother, which is, well, it's not as bad as that, Yeah. And I'm not to say that I won't ever experience something as bad as that again, but I do think these relative levels of like, wow, there's like real bad stuff that has happened, or real painful stuff, and this is really painful. But I know that I've climbed before. I've climbed out of this before, and I know I can climb out of it now. Yeah. That was something that I really relied on there, and I think it also taught me a lot about what I didn't know. I was trying to build this big company that was solving a global problem, and I had never taken the time to take the baby steps. Not to say that we have to go the same route as other people go necessarily to get there. But I had never sold anything before. Yeah. I had never built a functioning website that actually people actually visited before. Yeah. I had never marketed anything online before. I had never had anyone purchase anything from me. All these pieces of running a business that I just didn't know. And so when I set out to build DC Design, I started from the beginning. I started from the basics, and I said, well, I need to acquire all these skills. I'm going to acquire them piece by piece by piece by piece. And this is sort of going to be my business degree as I go.
Yeah. I hear that is such a common thing among business owners. There are so many business owners I know that did not go to business school and they have their training in something else. And then so all of a sudden, whatever their training is in or whatever passion they discover, and then they go into business for themselves and they're like, oh, wait, I should probably learn like some basics about business.
Yeah.
And so they kind of learn trial by fire. But sometimes that's just the best way to learn. It's like the best way to learn a foreign language is to just move to that country, because you just learn better by kind of immersion.
Yeah, that's really it's sort of who I'm from in many ways. I come from a working class family. I said briefly before, like if we were going to have anything in my family, we were going to build it. Mm-hmm. My dad is the best engineer that I know, and he doesn't have a degree in engineering. Yeah. He's a retired Air Force Master Sergeant, but I think we learn, and I've learned since then, by sort of that trial by fire thing you're talking about, right? Where you jump into it and you say, well, I've got to figure this out. And so I know I can figure this out. And so I will figure this out. Yeah. Which I find to be one of the most admirable traits in people when they're willing to embrace that.
Yeah. And they're willing to put in the work to figure it out. And they're saying, hey, you know what? I'm pretty sure I don't know how to do this, but I'm going to do the work to figure out or teach myself or learn how or whatever. Yeah, gosh, that's so important. So I want to shift a little bit to talk more about DC Design. And so this is, like I said at the beginning, when I learned it was a social impact design firm, I'm just completely transparent. I was like, I don't know what that is. So if there's somebody listening who's like me and is like, I don't know what that is, tell them, tell us, sure. What is it you do and what is exactly a social impact design firm?
Yeah. If I were to tweak it a little bit, I would say we're a social impact strategy and design consultancy, right? So what we do is we help the people who are on the front lines of delivering social impact, people who are trying to really address these big systems that we have, from criminal justice to foster care to education to healthcare, people who are trying to think about the people who are being left behind or forgotten or where the system isn't working for them. We help all those people deliver on their mission. And so we do that through a couple of ways. One way is by helping them develop their strategy. And so, we sit down with them and we say, well, what are your main priorities? What are the things that really matter to you? But then we also utilize this process called human-centered design. And that, for us, means getting to know and understand the needs of the people who actually live through a given challenge to help set those priorities. So it's one thing to say, the social worker is saying that this is what the issue is in foster care. But in addition to that, we should be talking to the foster youth to say, like, what are the issues that you're running into? Like, what happened to you this week? What happened to you last week? And they'll tell you, I was locked out of my house this week and I didn't have anyone to call and didn't have anywhere to go. And that's something that has happened to me 3 times, and it completely messes up my week, right? Mm-hmm. Completely messes up my flow. So we use a process where we talk to the people who've been incarcerated, or people who are incarcerated, or the people who are foster youth, or the people who are in any situation have lived through any challenge, to help organizations set their strategy. And then after that, after the strategy is set, after we've come to consensus by talking to all the people who have been affected by it, we also help them build whatever sort of solution it is that they want to build. So that might be delivering a strategic plan because they want to act on that themselves, or it might be developing an app like we did for a nonprofit in San Jose recently, that was looking at connecting the Latino community there, making sure that they had the resources needed to care for their kids, because that's really important. It's important that kids have the resources they need to grow and mature. And so we developed an app that helps connect the community, helps give parenting tips to parents, helps track child milestones as they grow older so that we can make sure that children are developing properly. And so, we run the gamut from the strategy side all the way to the delivery of whatever product, service, app it is that people are looking to create.
Yeah. And so through that, one of the things that you have actually created through learning all of what you've learned over the years, since starting DC Design and doing a lot of this work and working with these different types of people, is you've actually created design thinking impact retreats. So talk a little bit about those and what exactly those entail, and where did the idea for it come from?
Yeah. Yeah. I would say, my main goal is really, it's really about the souls of other people. It's the souls of my soul as well, I should
Yeah.
say. It's really about connecting with the part of us that, can't be cut unless we let it be cut. It's the
Mm-hmm.
part of us that says we can get back up even though we've been knocked back down. It's the part of us that says that each other matters. And I think in our work, that's sort of what we're always trying to express, whether we're doing it directly or not. The design thinking retreats are really focused on helping other people who feel that same way, who think, I really want to make an impact in the world, and I really want to gain some new skills and learn some new techniques for doing that. These retreats are designed to help teach the methods that we've developed and that we use to other people so that they can do that as well, so that they can touch the souls of other people and they can create the impact in the world that helps alleviate the suffering that we experience.
Man. So who are the types of people that are attending these? Are these just kind of independent people? Are they small businesses, or is it a combination of both?
It's a combination. We've got a couple different models for them, and we're always open and interested in hearing what people want as well, right? That's really what our whole model is based on, is saying, what is it that you need? What is it that you want? What would make you better? What would help you get to where you want to get to? Like, let us figure out how we can help you get there. But the people who are attending, oftentimes they're what we call social impact innovators. These are people who they're already thinking about these issues. They have a challenge that really bothers them, something that comes up for them over and over again. It keeps them up at night, and when they hear the news, they think, I really want to do something about this, right? They don't just turn it off. Those are the people that we're usually working with, and they come from all walks of life. Sometimes they work, at a company, and they have a job that isn't aligned with what we just said.
Yeah.
Sometimes they are the entrepreneur or the head of an organization that's trying to confront these big issues.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're somewhere in between. They're transitioning in their career, and they say, I really want to start this project or get this thing off the ground for this population of people. It's not really important to us where someone is in that process. What's more important is, do you have an issue that really matters to you? Do you have access to some of the people who've been through that challenge before, or can you gain access to them? And are you interested in really taking a look at some of the assumptions that you might have and learning more from them about what they can teach you as well, so that you guys can work on this problem together?
Okay, I'm so sorry to break from this incredible conversation with Durell, but I wanted to take a moment to thank our sponsor of the show, and that is the Root Collective. Now, the Root Collective is obviously no stranger to this show, as Bethany Tran, who is the founder and owner of TRC, is one of my dearest friends, and she was a guest really early on. I have been a huge fan and supporter of the Root Collective for years, and you can pretty much always catch me wearing their incredible shoes. Why? Because they are the most complimented pair of shoes that I own. And those compliments lead to a story about how my shoes are ethically made, empowering communities, and investing in change through job creation. You can visit stillbeingmolly.com/TRC and use the coupon code PURPOSE20 for 20% off your order. Now back to my chat with Durell. I'm somebody who social justice is in my blood, and I really care about elevating the worth of the voiceless, being a voice for the voiceless, and really figuring out what is it that I can do in my own sphere of influence and in my own circles and in my own life that can break the barriers of systems that are in place that might be oppressing a group of people, or what can I do to, positively impact, the foster care system in my community, or what can I do to support foster parents or foster families, or what can I do to volunteer in prisons, or whatever it is. I feel very that personal challenge to take on those things. Part of it is because of how I was raised. My mom was she was a social justice advocate. She was an advocate. The word advocate is on her gravestone. That's the type of person that she was.
Wow.
And so that that legacy was left for me. And so I feel very strongly in that area. And also just personally, like being a Christian, but I didn't even become a Christian until I was later in my 20s. Like being a Christian, I feel very called to that. And so one of the things that I really was drawn to you about was actually in your bio, where you just talk about how, like, in a time of heightened social tension, like how you're really tackling these issues with what you call a different kind of ammunition. And that's that human-centered design, which you talked about a little bit earlier. And man, I was just so, like, when I read that sentence, I was like, boom, I need to talk to this guy. And so I don't know if you'd be willing to talk about that a little bit more, because that's just something that is so near and dear to my heart, especially when it comes to things like prison reform and criminal justice reform, and the foster care system and things like that. Because, in the area that I live, like I live in Durham, North Carolina, and like the foster system is so broken here. Because I have friends who are foster parents, and like I see the struggles that they are facing as a foster parent. And then also I see the struggles that these kids are facing. And then, I also I volunteered at our local, or not local, but the women's maximum security prison in Raleigh. A few years ago, I was a volunteer there for quite a few years. And like just the brokenness in that prison and the structures within it. And so it did light this fire within me of like, what is it that I can do? What can I do as just like a regular Joe or regular Jane to make an impact? So when you say like in a time of a heightened social tension, you want to tackle these issues with human-centered design, what was it that really lit a fire under you to do that? And where did you even begin?
Yeah. That's so many fantastic little questions. Like,
yeah, I know. Sorry. I realized I kind of just like unloaded there for a second.
No,
I
that's great.
I have a habit of doing that.
One thing I'll say just to start with is I think it is the quote unquote average Joe. I think we're all average Joes.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I think we all, everyone starts off in a certain place, and then we get to these places where people say, oh, well, you're doing that, and so you're in a different category. But I don't think that's true. I think in the end, the only way that we really address these big issues that really affect us all, we act at times like they don't, right? Or we think at times that the person who's homeless, their life doesn't really affect us, but it does in many ways affect us. And if you just start to think about how that might impact you, you can think about that. So I think the only way that we're really going to confront those issues is if more and more and more of us are actually sort of in it, trying to make these changes happen. The way that I really got started down this specific path, I guess I'll answer with 2 points, two things that happened. So one was my first company failed. And as I was thinking about what are the challenges I want to address, I had been focused prior to that on things in other countries, right? And there's a term for this. It's called the exotic underclass. And it really says like, well, yeah, we want to go off to exotic locations and we want to do good there because we're worried about the people who are hurting in those places. And I think that there's a lot of merit to that. And that's really important that we have people doing that. But as I was thinking about it, I was also thinking about, kids here in the United States, people right here who are struggling or who are suffering or who are homeless or who are incarcerated. And so I thought back to this exercise that I did. And I think this is something that anyone can do to start with. I had this exercise when I was in college. And it was basically, the only assignment was list 100 problems in the world. And I started listing problem after problem after problem. And as I went through the whole list, I got through all these sort of mundane, like personal problems, cracks in the sidewalk when skateboarding, or like my clothes don't dry all the way in the dryer, things like that. So I got all those out of my system. And then I was sitting there and I was just looking at the paper and it was number 67. And I was thinking and I was like, what are the problems? What are the problems? And the next word I wrote was poverty. I was like, wildfires are going to tear through California next year, and we're not creating or inventing or designing things to address it, right? Hurricanes are coming, and people are going to be displaced, lives are going to be lost, and we know that they're coming, right? We know that a lot of these problems are on the horizon. Violence is increasing in in aspects of our country right now. And I think the first step is really identifying like what challenges, what problems are we facing that really resonate with us as individuals. So if we can figure out what that is, that's step one. The next step becomes, who are the people who are experiencing that directly, and how do I start having some conversations with them? And I think this is something, again, that anyone can do. It says, individuals who are in jail or leaving jail, like I can go talk to those individuals, right? Those people, as long as I've identified who they are, or social workers who are trying really hard to care for other people. I can go talk to them and I can ask them, like, what are the challenges you're facing? Like, what are the big things that, you're running into right now that aren't working?
Yeah.
And then I think the next step, and this is where that kind of, it doubles back to what we talked about before, right? We don't all have the skills needed at this very moment to do everything that we've been called to do, right? Or to do everything that we might need to do in order to really address these issues. But I have a tremendous respect for people who say, like, I don't know how to do this right now, but I will, right? I'm going to learn it. I'm going to figure out how to do something about this issue. And then we do a process of trial and error while working with a few individuals who have said, yes, I want to help you confront this issue for my population, right? For the people who are like me. So giving an example again, it might be, I really want to help people leaving jail get back on their feet. I went and talked to some individuals who have recently left jail, and some others who are really interested in working with me to figure out how we can provide some resources, right? And that might be, the first step might be as simple as I collect donations, right? To make sure that people have a bus ticket to get to the right place right when they leave jail, because that's a big issue, right? Or I collect enough money to make sure people can have a hot meal or 3 hot meals, right, for their first day out, because that's a big issue. Yeah. And we learn about these issues when we start having conversations with people about what they're going through.
Yeah. Oh, I could not agree with that more. I could not echo that more. I just want to like plaster that on a giant billboard and like paste it all over town. Because especially like during, a season of heightened social tension, and a lot of times, like, I've had a lot of conversations just kind of one-on-one with different people when we say like, and I've thought a lot about this, like where we've always, since you can look back into the time of the Old Testament, like we've always been in a season of heightened social tension. Like there has been and always will be a season of heightened social tension, but it feels worse. Because, and I'm like, the media, like, like I'm not like that guy that's like, the media. But like when we have, the news and social media that where like literally the statistic was 81% of news headlines last year were negative. So when you have a system in place where we're bombarded with news and 81% of the news headlines are negative, of course we're going to feel like the world's falling apart. When this stuff has always been happening, it's just being amplified. And so what do we do to kind of not ignore those things, but say, okay, well then how can we in our own circles begin to have conversations with people who look different from us, who think different from us, who believe different things from us, and how can we have conversations in a human way to say, hey, we might not agree on this particular thing, but like I'm listening. Right. I'm listening, and I'm not going to interject my opinion. I just want to hear your perspective. And I'm so grateful for the friends in my life who maybe we disagree on something, or maybe there's a particular issue that we disagree on, or maybe our perspectives might be different because our life experiences are different. I'm so grateful for those opportunities to have those conversations, but I have learned the most by having really tough conversations with people who have a different perspective. Like I think about like I have a really good friend who is very, very vocal in the anti-racism community. And she has taught me so much about like, what does it look like for me to use my white privilege in fighting anti-racism? And I mean, I grew up in Washington, D.C. Like I went to an incredibly diverse elementary school, middle school, high school. So it was not till I was an adult to where this was even like, it even occurred to me that this was a thing. Because of the environment that I grew up in, it was so diverse. It's not that racism didn't exist. It was just, it wasn't as much of an amplified issue because I lived outside of DC. But now here I live in the South, and it's just a different climate where it's like, oh no, these things have always existed. We just didn't necessarily talk about them.
Right.
So then I'm like, oh man. And so now I'm like just doing whatever I can. Like, okay, I want to learn, what does it look like to then use the fact that admit the fact that I was born with white skin, and so that gives me a certain amount of privilege. So then how do I use that privilege to break down the barriers of racism? You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I do. And I love that. Because I think that this notion of privilege, right? I think that it exists in so many forms.
Oh, for sure.
I have a type of privilege because of the education I have now, or the way that I speak, or my height, right? Like all these pieces help me do certain things. Mm-hmm. I think so much of what you said, I just love. I love this notion that, and with that privilege, it's like Spider-Man, right? With great power comes great responsibility.
Yes.
It's like, you've got all this ability, right? Yeah. And you can use it either for yourself and for yourself alone, or you can turn around and you can try to understand why someone else is living the life that they're living and maybe made the choices that they made, but maybe they were influenced by factors that are different than the ones that you're familiar with.
Yeah.
That's one thing. And then the second I would say is, one thing that I think about a lot is this balance, this notion of justice and redemption, right? Justice and redemption, and how they have to go hand in hand. Yeah. I think our social movements right now, they've pushed us so far towards justice, right? Towards this notion that we have to hold people accountable. We have to find the people who are doing wrong. We've got to call them out. And we've got movement after movement that starts from there. And I don't think it's bad ever to call out injustice. Mm-hmm. But I do think that piece around redemption, right? Mm-hmm. Helping make sure that there's a path for restoration for the people who are being accused of doing wrong or who have done wrong, while making sure that we really understand, what is it that caused you to make these choices? What is it that put you in this situation? What is it that in your environment might be different than what I've perceived before? That piece of understanding. I just love everything you just said about that.
Oh man, Durell, we could do a whole nother podcast on what you just said. Because I was just having this conversation with a friend of mine last week, and while this may not even be what you were intending, but it reminded me of that, because you said there's the justice and the redemption piece. And it is a friend of mine who's actually a pastor's wife, and we were talking about I'm going biblical here, but I was talking about in the Old Testament when David has his affair with Bathsheba, and it's a huge major sin on this man's life. David, he's King David. He's been appointed by God. He wrote half of the Psalms. He is David. And yet he has this major indiscretion where he has this affair with Bathsheba, and he has Uriah killed, and all these kinds of things. This is a big deal. And yes, he has to face the consequences of that, because the illegitimate child that was born of David and Bathsheba, what happens? The baby dies. And this is a very, very sad thing. But then who's the next child that's born? And that's Solomon, who then goes on and is anointed later to build the temple. And so we were talking a lot about this notion of repentance, and when we fail, when we sin, when we mess up, and whether you're listening and if you're a Christian or not, this applies to anybody. When we fail, sin is within us. We're gonna mess up. But if we take the time to repent and to go on that path of redemption, and to say, you know what, I screwed up and I'm sorry. But so often, it's God is the quickest to forgive us when we repent, and he even forgives David. He says your sin is wiped clean here. But then David still has to face the consequences of that behavior for the next decade. And so the consequences of his sin never really leave him, but he's been forgiven, and God still blesses him and all these things. But then we look at other people both in the Bible and in real life who just refuse to apologize or repent repent or just say, hey, you know what, I screwed up. And the circumstances turn out so differently. But then lately, I've just felt like this. I felt very heavy when we see somebody who has like a major indiscretion, or somebody in the public sphere, or somebody in our own lives, like in our personal life, who messes up, who screws up, and then they apologize. And it's like, we are so slow to forgive people.
Yeah.
And it's just like, yo, we all screw up. But at what point are we going to say, you know what? Like, I appreciate the fact that you apologized and said, hey, you know, I'm going to do better and I'm going to learn from this. Anyway, oh gosh, see, yeah, I told you I could go on, like, I'm going to go on a whole nother thing, but yeah, that is so good. Like justice and redemption. And it's just, so good.
And holding that here, right, on for one another, really, like creating the space for redemption for one another. I like that balance of there are still consequences for things that we do.
Yeah.
But the consequences, sometimes we choose them and we choose them to make them punitive. I want you to suffer. I want you to feel pain. I want you to go through X, Y, and Z. But that's not the same as the goal of saying, I want you to learn from what you've done and I want you to become a better person, you know? Yeah. And I think we get to be the ones who create the space for one another to feel safe, to say, yeah, I messed up and I need help.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, like, I think about, you know, like, and I haven't really shared completely my story on the podcast, but I've shared bits and pieces of it on my blog. But I made a lot of really like terrible financial decisions when I was in college and got myself in a lot of financial trouble. And when I was right out of college, and to the point that like I was in so much debt that I was just, like it felt beyond repair, but I didn't tell anyone what I was going through. And along the way, like I had to, you know, make really tough decisions to kind of protect myself, which I now know was a mistake because along the way I hurt people that I was close to because I didn't show up for things that I should have showed up for. And I didn't go to weddings, or I canceled last minute on plans because I didn't have the money to do it. And instead of just being honest and being open about the situation, I hurt people. And so I had to like later go back and repair some really close relationships and say, hey, here's what I was going through at the time. It's not an excuse. But it's just the reality that I was facing. And I really screwed up and I'm so sorry. And I'm so thankful that, you know, that a lot of those relationships were restored. But yeah, I mean, that was a really hard thing for me to do, to just kind of be like, hey, I screwed up big here. And I'm hoping that you can forgive me. And thankfully, like some of my best friends did. But that's hard for us as humans to do, to just be like, I screwed up. And I'm going to do better, you know?
Right. Absolutely.
Oh, man. All right. Well, Durell, I could like talk to you for 9 more hours. But before we transition to our get to know you round, how can people find out more about you? How can they find out about these design thinking impact retreats? How can they support the work you're doing?
Yeah. So the best thing to do would be to sign up for our newsletter at dcdesignltd.com. We announce the various offerings that we have there, whether it's consulting work that we've done, which I think some people enjoy following because they get to see or feel like, you know, some things are happening in these different spaces and what types of things are we discovering. Or, you know, we announce our impact retreats there, and we're really running the impact retreats in the Bay Area right now, but we will be launching them in other places around the country in the future. And so we'd love to just begin to build up that community of people who are really interested in saying like, yeah, I want to make a difference in my community. There's this issue that really bothers me. It doesn't have to be every issue. It can be one issue. I want to learn some of the skills and techniques that you use to really to make sure that the impact you're creating is real and meaningful. Because I think that's one of the other things that we're all craving. We all crave to know that what we're doing is actually making a difference, not just throwing money into the void, for example, right? And we've got a lot of thoughts on that. So definitely sign up for the newsletter at dcdesignltd.com. If you have high school age kids, we run a program that we developed called Design the Future, where we teach high school students to design products for individuals with physical disabilities. And so over the course of 6 days, students learn, they meet a project partner who's an individual with a physical disability. They learn that they're going to not design for that person, but with that person. who will be like a part of their team in many ways. And then they go on to understand everything it is to, about that specific challenge that that person is facing, come up with tons of ideas for it, create prototypes for it, test those prototypes, find out why their prototypes are horrible, feel down, et cetera. They go through this whole cycle. But at the end of the week, they create functional products that they can actually hand over to their project partner and know, hey, this is something that could be useful in this person's life to improve their quality of life. So if you've got high school students, we are actually in open enrollment right now for Design the Future. And that'll be beginning, those programs will be beginning in June and July. And so there will still be some time to sign up. Those are the main ways to sort of keep track of us.
Awesome. Well, that is really exciting, and I will make sure to include all of that info in the show notes. For those that are interested, you can refer to the show notes. But Durell, this is the portion of the show where we transition just a little bit to ask some fun, lighthearted, get-to-know-you questions. And as my listeners know, this is the part where my executive producer husband inserts a movie clip or like a television clip to transition us. We never know what it's going to be. It's always... it's a surprise every single week. So, Durell, are you ready?
I am ready.
I'm Prison Mike. Been a lot of fun talk about prison today, but I am here to scare you straight.
What'd you do, Prison Mike?
I stole, and I robbed, and I kidnapped the president's son and held him for ransom.
That is quite the rap sheet, Prison Mike.
And I never got caught, neither.
Well, you're in prison, but... Mm-hmm.
Okay, number one, would you rather go 30 days without your phone or in your entire life without dessert?
I would go 30 days without my phone.
Yeah, me too. No question. I'm like, I need
For
cheesecake.
Sure.
I need cheesecake. On that note, what is your favorite kind of dessert of choice?
You just said it. I love cheesecake.
Yes.
I'm a really big cheesecake fan. Cookies and cream ice cream is fantastic as well. But I love me some cheesecake.
Yes, give me all the cheesecake. Okay. Number two, what is the dumbest way you've ever been injured?
Oh. I was a kid. I was 9 years old, and I was talking to the neighbor from across the street. And I remember that we had this little trailer, this little rusty, tiny trailer. It was probably like 2 feet by 3 feet. And I was standing on it. And I remember my dad had said, don't stand on, don't play on, don't get near this trailer. Right. But I was standing on it because I was talking to the girl from across the street.
Yeah.
And I heard the front door open, and I was like, oh, no. And so I jumped off this trailer. But as I jumped, I ended up cutting the side of my leg open in like a 9-inch long gash, which immediately like over flooded, my sock and my shoe with blood and all sorts of stuff. And so I ended up it was actually my sister who was coming outside. So it wouldn't have even mattered, but ended up having to go to my parents, tell them everything that happened, go to the hospital, get tetanus shots, get a bunch of stitches, sit out of PE for like 2 weeks, Yeah, that's definitely number one. Number two is a close second, but we'll go with that one.
That's hilarious. That is so now that I'm a parent and like there's so many times where I'm telling my kids, I'm like, don't do that. You're going to get hurt. Like, don't do that. You're going to get hurt. And then the moment they get hurt and they're crying and like part of me, I should be the very compassionate parent, but I'm like, if you just listen to me, you wouldn't have been hurt.
I know, right? Yeah, it's so true.
Why do we do that? I don't even know. Okay. What is not real, but you desperately wish it was?
Goku from Dragon Ball Z.
That is not the answer. If you had been like, guess 50 answers, that is not on the list of answers I would have even remotely thought you'd say.
Molly, I have a whole other side that we haven't talked about yet. It goes deep.
That's amazing. That is amazing. Okay.
Maybe I should say the Dragon Balls from Dragon Ball Z. Maybe that's actually the answer.
No.
Yeah.
No. You said Goku. We got it.
I did say Goku. We'll run with it.
We got it. I love it. Okay. If you got stuck in an elevator and you were forced to listen to only one song, what would it be? If you say something like Katy Perry, I'm going to lose.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
No, I have to think about that one. Maybe Sunday Candy. That's what's coming to mind right now. Sunday Candy by Chance the Rapper.
Oh, all right. All right. I like it. All right. And then my last question is, and this is the one I ask all my guests, and that is, what are you most grateful for today in this very moment?
My wife, my wonderful family, and the fact that I'm still here. I have a roof over my head. And as an entrepreneur, I think life goes up and down, but I have these people and these things in my life that have stabilized it. And that just makes me really happy when I think about it.
That's awesome. Well, Durell, this has been such a pleasure, such a joy. You are awesome. And now I feel very glad to know, not only do I know what a social impact design firm does, but I'm just really grateful for the work that you're doing. And just thank you for coming on the show today and telling everybody about you and your story.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
I really appreciated Durell's honesty in regards to the story of the loss of his brother and the issues around racism and so many things that our country's facing that he is really, really trying to tackle in a thoughtful way. I want to know what you loved about this conversation or something that you learned. Let me know on social media. You can find me at Still Being Molly or at Business with Purpose Podcast on Instagram or Facebook. And don't forget to use that hashtag Business with Purpose Podcast. As always, thank you to our sponsor, The Root Collective. Visit stillbeingmolly.com/TRC and use that coupon code PURPOSE20 for 20% off your order. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. If you are a first-time listener, welcome, welcome, welcome. Be sure to visit the archives for past shows featuring so many incredible entrepreneurs and business owners who are literally changing the world with their businesses. And if you are a regular listener of the show, thank you for tuning in and week out, and thank you for your support. Be sure to head on over to iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Overcast, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts, and make sure you're subscribed to the show. Clicking that subscribe button helps to make sure you never miss a new episode of the show. And while you're there, would you mind leaving a review? Leaving a review helps me to know what you're liking and how the show is personally impacting you. As always, the show is edited by my amazing husband and executive producer, John Stillman. The music is by Mark Killian of Third Wheel Media with support from Mark Haywood. Thank you so much for listening, and go do something good with purpose on purpose.